Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 9, The Sword of Kahless. Before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, and will probably continue to say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are a great time. You're going to learn a lot, you're going to have a lot of fun, hopefully, and just get to hang out with some pretty cool people, I think. Um, but yeah, you can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts, and of course, you can find us on the various social media platforms. I have totally given up on the Twitter thing. I don't know what's happened. I've asked for support. I've asked for information, so forth and so on, and no one really seems to understand what has occurred. So it's just like I can log in on my personal Twitter account and I can see the Fire Cave account and I can see that everything is still there, but it just won't give me access. So
Mhm.
until that gets fixed, until the greater higher ups in the Twitterverse decide that, oh yes, this is okay, we're just gonna leave that alone for now. And anything that we need to do through Twitter, I guess I'll just do through my personal account for a while. I don't mind because pretty much all that my personal account is these days is Star Trek anyway. So it's not going to be that big of a stretch for me to have to just do things there.
Right.
So yeah. But yeah, if you were following along, I apologize for there not being any updates on Twitter or whatever. But you can still find us on Facebook, and stuff on YouTube is going to be changing soon as well. So a lot of different ways that
I
you
guess
can
I'll have to take
be a
the
part.
Twitter part out of my intro. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify. I'll have to just say
Yeah,
Facebook,
yeah.
Spotify.
At least for now. When we get it back up and running, we'll return to that. Um, but yes, we are here to talk about the Sword of Kahless, both the episode and the item
Mhm.
itself, and kind of give you a little bit of back lore on not just the sword itself, but on Klingon history and some of the characters. And there's a lot of other things that really crop up in this episode, which give us like a kind of a deep dive on Klingons that we haven't had before, really.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of the things about Deep Space Nine that I also enjoyed so much is that we do get into Klingon stuff. So we're gonna get to all that, of course. But before we do that, David, I have to ask, how was your week?
It was okay. That's We're ramping up for one of the bigger sales of the year, being Memorial Day in the mattress industry. And a lot of changes going on. Like Tempur-Pedic is having a whole bunch of changes, new beds coming in. And today, man, today was just one of those days where you're like, it's just a day, had to stay a little late. That's actually why we're on a little late tonight, is because I had to stay late at work because someone came in and kept me a little past our normal closing, which it's not the end of the but I would appreciate customers who are a little more sensitive to the fact that I've been there for 10 hours. If you come in at 7:35 and keep me past 8, I've been there for more than 10 hours. So, but anyway, um, had this one customer, man, who he's been in the store before, but he is the only person I've ever met who has such long pauses in between talking. Like he can't formulate the end of his thought, so he just says a lot and then just starts shrugging as if I'm supposed to follow along with his thought process. And I'm like, I don't know what you're thinking. Like you got to keep talking. So, and it's like you're in there and you're trying to help someone, and it's like I don't know what this conversation is I'm supposed to be having with you because you're not completing your sentences. Um, but anyway, other than that, it's been fine. The new Legend of Zelda game came out literally technically yesterday, but it came out like Thursday night. So I've been playing that. That's been fun. One of my coworkers made me play the previous Legend of Zelda game. I never played Legend of Zelda before. It just wasn't my
I never played it
game.
either.
But
I've seen it, but I've never
yeah,
played it.
yeah, and it's the current ones are open world games, so you have a lot of
Mm.
space to explore, which is a lot of fun. The games are fairly well designed. So played that a lot at work today and yesterday when I wasn't helping people out. So that's been fun. So yeah, how about you? What's going on with you?
Well, no Zelda. But as I had told you before, I had started playing the Mass Effect game. They did a re-release or yeah, where they remastered a bunch of stuff, and then you can get all the games 1, 2, and 3 in the Legendary Edition. So through some computer trickery, I guess I ended up getting the game for free, the Legendary Edition. So I have all 3 of them for free. So yes, I was definitely enjoying that and playing it. And then
Nice.
I was looking into Red Dead Redemption as well. I
Mm,
never played that game, but
mm,
I was a big fan of a lot of other Rockstar games, like in
mm,
particular the Grand Theft Auto series.
mhm.
And I, for some reason, I just missed Red Dead Redemption. And then when the second game came out, Part 2 came out, I had seen other people playing it and had gotten interested through that.
Right,
Now I wanted to go back and try and play it myself, and so I haven't done it yet. I haven't made any purchases or anything like that yet, but
right.
I'm probably gonna do that soon.
Gotcha.
Also been reading the H.P. Lovecraft, getting into
Nice.
that a bit, and while the text can be a bit heavy, um, they're great stories. We'll get into more of that later, I'm sure, but it's been really great. But this day, today in particular uh, has been wild. It started
Yeah.
late last night with the thunderstorms, and I swear that there must have been a lightning strike like directly outside my window. Early this morning, it was loud. It shook the place. It was awful, and of course,
Yeah.
all of my power went out. So then, things started to come back on, and I'm doing the whole, checks and making sure everything's, working. And of course, like nothing's working. Like I have power, but like certain things are just completely fried. Like the new LED lights that I bought like a month ago,
Oh no.
they're now dead. So I'm
Oh.
upset about that. So I'm gonna have to get those. My adjustable base on my bed apparently is dead. I may be able to fix that. I was reading through the manual. There seems to be kind of there's a way to reset it, but it was rather complicated. And plus, there's just me, so having to like lift the bed and get under there and do everything, as we both know, those adjustable bases are not light. So yeah,
No.
doing that by myself has was is going to be difficult. So I'll probably save that for tomorrow, because first thing this morning I had to go and get a new modem and router and everything else, because all that got fried. And I need to
Wow.
have it so that one, we could do our show tonight, but also so I can work, because I work from home, and
Right.
without internet, there is nothing.
Wow.
So had to go get that replaced. And then I found out that um, the Ethernet what was the
Cable.
term for it? Not the cable, but the actual port where it plugs into where the cable actually plugs into the computer
Right.
on my not on my work computer, but on my personal computer, completely fried. So I'm gonna have to have that replaced. But
Well, at least the
I had
computer itself still works.
yes, the computer itself still works. Um, I had long ago got a little Bluetooth adapter so that I
Right.
could, be wireless even on my desktop computer. So that was fried as well. So I had to get a new one of those today. So that was a lot easier to fix than the actual Ethernet port. They were like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to take this off and get in there and do all this stuff." And I was like, "Look, I don't have time for any of that. So just give me what I can get so that I can be online for now, and then we'll come back
Right.
and we'll do all that other stuff."
Right.
So there was that, and then what else? There was something else that happened. I'm forgetting, because it was just a list of things that just kept happening. Every time I turned around, something else was broken, not functioning, burnt out because of the lightning from
Wow.
this morning. So that's been my whole day. Has just been running around trying to replace things and fix things and everything else. And also preparing for Mother's Day. That's tomorrow, so we're
Yep.
um, trying to do some things for my mother, who I think I've talked about her before on the show.
Yep.
But my mother has recently gone blind, and so trying to figure out things to do for her that don't require her to necessarily see everything has been interesting, because all of our thoughts at first for gifts was always, oh, let's get her this monogram thing, or let's do this or this, here's this book, or here's what like stuff like that. And it's like, why? Like she
Right.
can't, she's not, I mean, I'm sure she would appreciate it, but at the
Mhm.
same time, she wouldn't really enjoy it. So what we've decided to do is kind of do a trip down memory lane via the other senses, right? So we've got her favorite dessert from when she was little that her father used to make. We got a she's always talked about like crushed, what's that, crushed velvet, you know. So we got
Okay.
a robe that's got crushed velvet on the inside, so that will feel nice.
Right.
um Favorite drinks, favorite foods, favorite smells, perfumes. We found, just things along that nature. We just got a
Right.
big bunch of that together, and my
Right.
sister and I are basically just going to kind of take her through it while also playing music from like different stages in her life. So, like, here's songs when you were a kid, here's your teenager stuff, here's early adulthood, and so forth, and just kind
Nice.
of having the
That's
whole
great.
thing geared around that.
Yeah.
So hopefully she enjoys it. Hopefully it doesn't, like, I could see this going the other way as well, but I'm
Yeah.
hoping not. I'm hoping that the thought process behind it
Right.
will will carry us quite far. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
but yeah, so that has been everything for me, and
Right.
I will
I
of course update you and let you know if that
gotcha.
works out or not.
I did forget to mention I started season 2 of Altered Carbon with
Okay.
Anthony Mackie. So far, it's fine. I'm only 3-ish episodes in, so it's not enough to like give a verdict on the season yet. I will say it feels smaller. It feels like the sets they're using aren't as big. Like the scope of the story seems smaller because he's not on Earth anymore. In the first season, he's on Earth. Second season, he's not. He's on like a colonized planet, but it's smaller than Earth, and you can kind of feel it, and it doesn't feel quite right to be
Hmm.
frank. But it's almost, but it's not like that's a bad thing necessarily. It's just like it's a different place, and it feels different. Um, but so far, Anthony Mackie is doing fairly good, having to come in as the main character for season 2. The main character can shift bodies,
Hmm.
so that's the premise. So it's the same character from season 1. He's just now in Anthony Mackie's enhanced body.
Yeah, the super soldier, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Um,
He's got
yeah.
guns now that will, like, if he puts his hands out, they'll like come to his hands, which is pretty cool. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, and then the other thing is I just have a fun thing I like to do when new movies come out that I'm looking forward to. I love always watching Christopher Nolan series of movies, like all of them from his like from beginning to like whatever is current, and then like his new movie Oppenheimer comes out, so I plan on watching all of those at some point. But for the moment, what I'm going to do is every Sunday night I'm planning on trying to watch one Mission Impossible movie every week until the new one comes out.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I had said that I wanted to do something similar, but for me, it was I just wanted to watch them all. Like, I didn't have a once a week thing. It was like I'm just gonna pick a day sometime before
oh, and just
the
knock them
new
all
one
out.
comes out, right, and just like watch them right before the new one comes out, and
Right.
then just be ready. But
Well, that's kind of what I
oh,
plan on do for Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is just like trying to
okay,
watch as many Christopher Nolan movies as I can get done before the movie comes out. And if I can't get them all done, maybe I'll just pick the ones I want to watch. But for Mission Impossible, if I do one a week, then it's like you get a
yeah.
constant steady dose. Because apparently the plot of the new movie coming out like ties all the way back to the first movie. Like one of the
See,
baddies.
it's been so long since I've even seen the first movie. Like, it's
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking forward to, because when they announced that there was going to be another one, I sat and just thought about it. I was like, I mean, seriously, it was, what, 20 years ago,
Oh no, man! It was
30.
'90s. It
Yeah, I
was
was
at
going to
least
say 30
'90s.
years ago.
It's like at least 25. I
Oh
mean,
man.
let me put it this way: Tom Cruise was in his early 30s when they made that movie, and he's like a little over 60 now, I think. Like it's at least 25ish years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So,
yeah,
okay.
that
With
classic
my
scene of him dangling on the floor off the
They're going to have to bring
wire.
that back. They're going to have to
Ah,
bring that back.
oh, they have
So,
to. I
yeah.
think in every movie they've had him do it except the last one. I don't think they had him do that in the last one. So I'm like,
Well, we'll see. Can Tom Cruise still do it at 60 something years old?
yeah.
Tune in to Mission Impossible. What is it? Six, seven,
7. So this will be the
seven?
seventh
Yeah.
one.
Wow.
Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Oh,
It's a
part one.
two-parter. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So they already know. All right.
Yep.
Well, we're not here to talk about Tom Cruise and the odd way that he kind of looks the same.
The man
You know,
doesn't age. Turns
you
out the
know,
blood of virgins is very potent in keeping you young.
yeah, it's the fat checks he's writing to those high-priced surgeons. That's what it really is. But
Yeah.
yes, not here to talk about any of that. We are here to talk about Kahless, his magic sword, and Kor, the Har Master for
Hmm.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
And I'm
So
already gonna say it. You're gonna be recapping this one.
I was
It's
gonna say
definitely
I'm
a
gonna
you
do this
episode.
one.
Yeah,
Yes,
go
yes,
for
it
it. Go
is.
for it. I had
Now,
no hesitation. Yeah, go ahead.
yes, because it also features one of my also all-time favorite characters, Worf, and I when I realized this episode was coming up, I at first wasn't gonna watch it again, but then I was like, no, we've got to. I've just got to see it again, and I was promptly rewarded. There's some great stuff in here.
Yeah,
So
just real
anyway,
quickly, I just want to
yeah,
say I read on Wikipedia right before we got started. This is the first episode that they wrote when they realized that Michael Dorn as Worf was going to be joining the show. So this is the first episode since the season started, other than the beginning of the season, where he's actually featured heavily as opposed to
yes.
just a side character. So this is great. So yeah,
I
go for
loved
it.
I love okay, so we're gonna get to that too. Okay.
Yeah,
Real quick recap here. This episode starts off with Kor at Quarks, and he is telling this great story about him and Kang and Koloff, who you should remember from a early episode in what was that, season
season
2, I
two,
think?
I think so.
Yes,
Yeah.
where Jadzia meets up with those three and goes off to kill the albino, where of course Kang and Koloff died, and Kor
Mm,
was our sole survivor. So
right.
now he's back. He's regaling everybody with tales and quirks. And after doing all that, we see Worf kind of sitting off to the side, not being a part of the festivities. And eventually they get around to meeting thanks to Jadzia. And Kor reveals the real reason that he's here. He is on a quest to find the most famous Klingon artifact ever, the Sword of Kahless, the Batleth of Kahless, and he is convinced that he can do this because some Vulcans who were doing a archaeological dig on the other side of the wormhole found this shroud that apparently the Batleth had been wrapped in at one time. Jadzia
Oh,
does her science thing, is able to determine that yes, this shroud did contain at some point a Batleth that was stained with the blood of a Klingon and the blood of the ancient Klingon enemy, the Herc. Again, we'll be back to them, and is made from the necessary materials that would have been around 1400 years ago, which is when Kahless was supposedly stomping through the universe. So now they're on their quest. They convince Cisco to give them the Rio Grande, the shuttlecraft, so that they can go and investigate. They find the ruins. They get through the magical force field that apparently has been in operation for several centuries, and no one has bothered to take it down. They find the secret room. The room's been ransacked. They find another secret room inside the secret room, and there it is, the Sword of Kahless. They're, of course, struck with all the awe and majesty of the sword. They take it, and then they are immediately set upon by Duras, who I forgot had sent a Lethian, again, another character or creature, anyway, alien, not creature, alien that we had seen earlier on in another episode where Dr. Bashir was having some memory issues, and
right.
we find out that the Lethians have the ability to basically strip your mind of whatever they want. And
Right.
so early on in the episode, we had seen the Lethian do this to a drunken core, and he had gotten the information from him, which allowed Duras and company to follow them to the ancient Herc site. And they were set upon by Duras, and it's Duras Jr., Taral, and it's revealed that this is the same Klingon boy who years ago, when Worf had an opportunity to kill him, Worf had decided not to because at the time Taral was like 9 or 10 years old. And he was just like, "I'm not going to kill a child."
Right.
Um, Obviously, this has come back to bite him in the butt here because now Taral is just like the rest of the Duras family. He's terrible and tries to steal it from him. They fight. Our heroes get away. They seemingly trap Taral and his group behind the force field, but eventually they are able to escape and follow Jadzia, Kor, and Worf. But meanwhile, while this is going on, our hero trio is having several different difficulties. You
Right.
know, Kor has become convinced that he should be the only one who should have the sword, and that Worf is not a true Klingon because he didn't kill Taral way back when he had the opportunity. They are sowing the seeds of distrust between the two of them. So it's gone from hero worship and admiration to this weird, they're plotting against each other bit. We also find out a lot about Worf and his, kind of personal backstory, which oddly, it's weird that it's at one point you feel like you know a lot about Worf, but then when you're listening to him talk about like his experiences growing up and being a Klingon in a Vulcan community, and then finally go into a Klingon community and not being accepted there, and all of these things, it makes you realize there's a lot about him you don't know, and you start to feel a
Right.
little sad for him, and realizing
Yeah.
how lonely and isolated he's always felt all of his life. So now, but Worf kind of gets into his own little bit of megalomania there and starts thinking he should be the one to not only have the sword, but also lead the Klingon people. There's another big fight. They end up beating up Duras's people some more, but Worf and Kor start to fight as well. Worf puts up a hell of a fight for a man who's been stabbed and only has one good arm. I was quite impressed with the fact that he was able to lift Kor off of his feet and pin him up against the wall at one
Right.
point before Jadzia shoots them both with a phaser, and then they beam up to the ship, and then they decide that while it may have been in their destiny to find the sword of Kahless, it was not in their destiny to keep it, and they set it on a platform and they beam it into space, where it could, as they say, float for another 1,000 years before it's found by the true people who were destined to find it. However, if you notice when it's floating, there apparently is a star pretty close by, so I'm confident in saying that thing burned up somewhere not too far from wherever it is they beamed it. That was just my thought when I saw that. But whatever. Maybe, I mean, it's the magical sword of Kahless, so maybe it survives.
Star
But
Trek Discovery, Jumping to the Future, did
there
answer
you
that for
go.
us.
You know what? I had the same thought when I watched this. I was like, they said 1,000 years. Discovery jumped ahead 1,000 years. Wouldn't it be funny if like they found the sword of Kahless floating around somewhere
Yeah.
before the show ends? But whatever. But yes, that is essentially the episode. We are going to get into a lot of different things here, of course. But before I ask David for first impressions, there's a little bit of housekeeping I wanted to do. Last week with Little Green Men, I had said that with that little line, piano playing Democrat, that was the first time that a president had been mentioned on Star Trek. That is actually not true. Um, the original series actually had an episode that featured Abraham Lincoln, a full-fleshed version of Abraham Lincoln, which ultimately then turned out to later on be a alien manipulation. But if you just want to go with, if you want to go
Mentioning.
with the mentioning of a president, then they were first.
How about for the time frame of the shows when they were coming out in the 90s, 80s, and 90s? That was the first time, even on TNG, they hadn't mentioned the president or something. Does that sound like a nice
I mean, we could.
compromise?
I guess we could do that. I guess we could. We could do that. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I'm aware before people, the actually that's not the, before any of that
Yeah.
happens. I'm aware. I had just forgotten, and then I was thinking about it and realized I had forgotten about Abraham Lincoln being on the original series. So
Right.
wanted to clear that up. But that's it. Now back to you, David. And first time watching this fantastic Worf centric episode.
Right.
What what did you think? Like when it was when the episode was done, what did you think of this one?
Well, I'm going to jump to the end at first because that's the thought that stands out in my head the most. I feel like the conflict resolution of we realize together that we can't handle the division of the sword. It's too much of a temptation. Therefore, we're going to beam it into space. I feel like that conclusion came too quickly. It came during a commercial break. I was watching the clock because I got the commercial breaks coming up. I'm cooking dinner. I'm like turning off the ads while they play so like I don't have to listen to them. And I'm watching the time and like we got this major conflict with Worf and Kang. I'm sorry, Kang, not Kang. Is it Kang? Not Kang.
Core. We're
Core.
dealing with
Sorry,
Core. Kang and
Core.
Koloth are dead.
Yes, I'm sorry. When Core is held up by Worf, and then Jadzia shoots both of them, and then she turns to the Duras boy or whatever, and says, "Okay, about that jamming signal keeping us from getting to our ship." And then a commercial break, and then we come back, and Worf and Core are in agreement about beaming it back or beaming it away, and I find that conclusion unsatisfying because I'm like, hey, how did y'all agree to that? I mean, did Jadzia beat it into you during the commercial break? I didn't see that resolution. So I feel like, yeah, the episode was fun and great, and there was conflict, and you got the full on Klingon mentality going on. You know, what does honor mean? What does it mean to be a traitor? So you got all of that great stuff, but I'm frustrated they didn't end it as well as I wish they had. That they resolved it off screen. Again, another instance where maybe a two-parter would have been good, but oh well. Um, so yeah, but a lot of the Klingon stuff, learning about Worf, as you mentioned, that's good stuff.
Mhm.
Again, if I think I've already said it, the thing that I'm most surprised that Star Trek has ever done for me as a viewer is make me like the Klingons and root for them
Okay.
and enjoy them. They are an enjoyable race. I did not expect that when I first started this show. I thought the Klingons were going to be this weird, off-putting, but it's
Yeah.
not true. They are fascinating as a species, as a culture in this sci-fi universe, and this is another example of it. How is Kang, not
Core.
Kang, Core? I don't want to keep saying Kang.
Core.
Why?
The
How
higher
is
master.
Core? How is Core on Deep Space Nine when you have the breakdown relationship between the Klingons and the Federation? He's just there. Okay, fine. You know, not every
Because so basically, just to give you a little aside there, basically he has attained a status that will allow him to pretty much do whatever he wants.
right. That's
He is
definitely
Tahar Master Core, which
right.
that rank has not just it's not necessarily a full-on military rank, even though it does have military privileges, because pretty much everything the Klingons do has some kind of military tradition to it.
Right.
But it's also a societal rank for him as well. So
Right.
when you've achieved that status, yeah, you pretty much can do whatever you want. It
Right.
also explains why the other two, when they were alive, Kang and Koloth, could just appear places
Yeah.
and do stuff and go off on missions and have ships and whatever else, and no one questioned it because they
Right.
had basically done everything and lived through everything, and they
Right.
were frightening in their own right,
Right.
so yeah.
And what's great about that scene when you first see him in this episode is that he's being braggadocious about past adventures, and it becomes very clear early on that he is way over exaggerating certain features, and that comes up throughout the episode. In particular, when they catch the rat-like thing to eat food, they start making it. They turn it into a
Their
dragon. They turn
embellishments,
this
yes,
rat into a
their
fire-breathing
embellishments
dragon
of
by the time
yeah.
they retell it, and
And we
that's
see how
fine.
much that really kind of upset Worf, who
That's exactly my
earlier
point.
had been
Yes.
so in awe of Core and his story, and
Right.
now he's like, "Oh, you just lie? So that's what it is? You just lie
Right.
about everything?"
Right.
Yeah.
And what's great about that is that Worf has always been our vision into Klingon culture, and he gives us a very stark version of Klingon culture. And
Yes.
then
Yes, he
here
does.
comes Core, and he's giving us a very different, but you can understandably is an understandably different version of Klingon culture. And Worf has always been the oddball out. Like whenever you've met other Klingons, Worf is always of trying because he grew outside of Klingon society. He is always trying to go after the ideal version of what a Klingon is
Very
because
true.
he didn't grow up in Klingon culture and therefore isn't like in it. He's not jaded to it. He has to prove himself to himself and to others that he's a Klingon, and so he's always trying to obtain to a really high standard of what it means to be a Klingon. And so,
Like a very distilled, purified honor code where
right,
he's taken these hardcore tenets of the Klingon code and he strictly adheres to them.
right,
And whereas everybody else looks at them, they're more like guidelines, as
than
they say.
actual rules.
For
I was
other
going to say the
guidelines, yeah,
exact
more
same
like
line.
guidelines
Yes, than
to the
actual.
Klingons. To other
Yes,
Klingons, they're more like guidelines. Whereas to Worf,
they
this is
are.
the end all be all.
This is his
And
Bible. Yeah,
yeah, and
he's treating it
he doesn't
seriously.
like people who tend to deviate too far from some things, which is interesting considering that if you really think about it, Worf has his moments where he kind of is more flexible than others, and that will come up later on in other episodes of the show. We'll see it, but I mean, but yes, like
But in some way,
essentially
that's my
though,
point. Is like
yeah,
other Klingons can have some bend to their rule breaking. They can treat the rules with some flexibility. But Worf is the one who has to treat the rules as they are the rules. They are strict. They are straight. They don't bend, and that's why he gets upset with Core as someone who seems to be bending the rules. He
and
was all about we're going to take the sword of Kahless to the Emperor and reunite the Klingons, and we're gonna bring about a new glory days. And then oh no, actually I don't like the Emperor. I think the Emperor is just a figurehead. I've
yeah,
been talking big talk this whole time. I actually want it. The question I have is, it seemed like the show was trying to indicate, like I couldn't well it seemed like the sword of Kahless was, it almost felt like it was trying, like there was, like it was having a literal an effect on them, but then it
hmm,
also wasn't. It was just the two of them, and they're
yeah, I see what you're saying.
getting,
Yeah,
like their imaginations got the better of them. So
yeah,
part of me was thinking, okay, is this the problem of the sword? Like the sword does this to everybody. Like I thought maybe the twist was going to be that the fall of that alien race that stole the sword in the first place, like they fell because the sword somehow caused them to get into infighting, and that collapsed their empire because the sword was always a symbol of their power and conquering other nations, blah blah blah, and then they collapse. And so that's the problem of the sword, is only a great spiritual leader like Kahless is able to master the power of the sword. But then that's not what it is. It's just like the end of the episode is just like, no, it's just that you and I, Worf and Core, you and I, Worf and Core, are unable to handle the emotional
yeah.
weight of having it.
I
Uh,
always took it as certainly that the latter there. What
yes,
you're saying, that
yes,
it was that this is a intensely, sacred artifact, and it's the power imbued in the artifact through their belief system
right,
that is making them view it a certain way.
right,
And so yeah, it has no more power or ability than any other Batleth, but because it
right,
was Kahleth's Batleth, the
right,
mythical man himself,
right.
who they
We have
built
met Worf.
everything on.
Worf
Now, as I
did have
said, Worf, there is the clone of Kahless. There is a clone of Kahless that's running around. They made him the Emperor, so we know
right,
that there was at one point a real Kahless. Kahless did exist. He
right,
was a Klingon man, but did he do the things that, the stories have said that he did? Probably not, especially if core is any indication. We know that there's a
that's
lot to do with embellishments.
yes,
Did he? Certain things I'm going to say yes, he probably absolutely did. Did he kill Molar? Yeah, probably, because Klingons kill people.
right.
There's the thing. Did he kill him? Yes. Did he carve through the mountains of the whatever that was that they said at the beginning? No, probably not. Okay, I don't think he took a sword and did it. Now, and
Right.
even the creation myth of the Batleth is something that obviously we know he didn't do. In the story that they tell, basically Kaleth walked all the way up to the mountain with the giant volcano, and there was a river of lava pouring down, and he cut off a long lock of his hair, plunged it into the fiery pits of lava, and twisted and moved it all around until he pulled it out, and there it was, the first Batleth. Did he really stick his hands in lava and turn his hair into metal?
No.
No, he didn't do that. But is it possible he walked up to a mountain and he scooped up some of the lava and then later used that in the distillation process to make the first batleth? Yes, that is more likely. That's more logical.
Right.
Yes. So I will say that there's probably elements of that, and maybe in the process of him making the batleth, he cut himself a few times so his blood drips onto the steel. Maybe he, his hair got burned because he's dealing with hot stuff, and Klingons have long hair, and
Right.
maybe some of his hair burned, and so that got in there, and then That's the story. The blood, sweat, and hair of Kahless was
Are
forged
in this
into,
sword. Yeah.
right, were forged into the first sword of Kahless. Yeah.
Right.
So stuff like that. I think that that's kind of how you have to look at a lot of this stuff, but then it's been built up over the years, just like we do a lot of myths and stuff like that
Right.
in human history. We do the same
Yeah.
thing.
George
Yeah.
Washington chopping down a cherry tree when he was a child. All
Yeah,
that stuff.
all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Um
speaking of, oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, go,
I
go.
was getting about the sword, like the way each of them, Worf and Core, treat the sword is very important because there's that again that scene where they're embellishing the rat turning into a dragon, and Core goes to use the blade to pierce a piece of meat to eat it. This is the sacred or the legendary sword, and Worf is offended that he would be using it in such a casual way. And
Hmm.
then Core comes back saying, "This was a sword. It was used. It was a tool.
It was a
It's
tool, right?
yeah. It's a
Kahless himself used it to plow fields and to
yes.
kill animals and did
Yeah.
all this stuff with it. It's like,
And
yeah,
it's not meant to be in a museum like those aliens treated it.
yeah.
It's meant to be used. And
Worf
again, it's
Worf wants to put it up on a pedestal. He even like propped it up next to the fire so that it
right.
could glint in the light. And
Yeah.
Core was like, "Well, would you look at him? It's
Yeah.
just such a jerk in that
Right.
moment." But it was, but I mean, he's right though. Like,
Right.
if you are to believe all the stuff about Kahless, then obviously this sword wasn't just his weapon; it was his tool. He used it to do a lot of things. So in that moment, I felt like I agreed with Core.
Right.
It's a tool. It's meant to
Right.
be utilized, not idolized.
Yeah.
And Worf was definitely engaging in some hardcore idolatry here
Well, what's
throughout
funny
this
about
episode.
that, I get it. Part of it though is like that is the first real indication we have that Core wants the blade for himself because he's using it in a personal manner. He's
Hmm.
personally eating off of it. Only someone, I mean, if it's your batleth, do it with what you want. It doesn't matter if it's Kaliss's previously or not. If you own it now, do with what you want. Um, and you're right. Worf being all upset about it is proof that he's putting it on a pedestal, literally. Um, but yeah, it's just it turns into a great example of the differences of thought between the two of them.
Hmm.
And if I have to say anything about again why I was frustrated that the episode just seemed to kind of end too quickly, is I did want a closer resolution between these two. I do want as Jadzia would she knows both of them. She's known
Hmm.
Core for almost 100
Two
years, right?
lifetimes now. Two
Yeah,
lifetimes now.
and
She's known Core, and now she's
exactly
been working with Worf for what?
at least 8 episodes.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
what?
if
Maybe not even a
and I
full
know
year
the
yet.
future between Worf and her a little bit,
Hey,
so
hey,
it's
hey,
like
hey, 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 hey!
I don't know
Spoilers.
any details. I just know
Shut
like
up, David.
I was
There
just
might be
thinking.
some other people who haven't watched this 30-year-old show. Be quiet. All
Well, I
right.
was just thinking about that as I was watching it. I was like, this is the first time we're seeing them together in a real close light. Let's see how that goes.
Hmm.
I don't think any insight was really made there at this
No.
time, um, but yeah. But my point is I wished that the two of them had been able to reconcile on some level.
Well, all I'm going to say on that is, we're only in season 4, so
Only
shut up.
season four.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now, so yeah, shut up. Anyway,
No, I mean Core
I know what
and
you meant.
Worf.
I
Oh,
know, and that's what I'm
oh.
saying.
Okay, only
We're only
season
in
four.
season
Only season
4.
four. Okay, all right. Okay, great.
All right.
Um,
So now I did want to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to talk histories because they give us a lot of histories of a lot of different things here that we should really pay a lot of attention to. There's Worf's personal history that we get. We also have the history of the Klingon people with the Herc invasion 1,000 years ago. We hear a little bit about that, and then we also should cover the history of the Duras family because they are a rather famous family in the Star Trek universe, and they keep popping up. And especially when you need like a bad Klingon, they're the Duras name. They've done a great job of being like those guys, right? The go tos. So I'm gonna do the Herc first because it's the quickest. It's basically covered here already. The Herc. invaded the Klingon homeworld 1,000 years ago, basically destroyed, ransacked, and stole everything that they could. As they say here in the episode, anything they couldn't pillage, they burned or destroyed or whatever, right? And it's became synonymous. The word "herc" became synonymous as outsider in the Klingon language. That's how bad the situation was, how bad that invasion was, and obviously the Klingons lost during this. So um, the Klingons don't really talk much about their losses. They had to have happened at some point. The Klingons can't just win everything, but the fact that an invading force was such a devastating impact on this culture that they became known, that word became outsider for them, I think that's pretty significant as well.
Right.
Um, Also, just the state of the Klingon Union at this point. Let's not forget that we've seen a dissolution of the Federation Klingon peace treaty. So we know that tensions are high. Again, like you were pointing out, how is Core able to get around when Gowron, the Chancellor of the Council, is like Federation is out,
Right.
basically. Core is able to do it because he's a Dahar master, and as Cisco points out, going on this quest and finding the sword of Kahless could do a lot to repair relations between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. So
Right.
um, those things definitely to keep in mind here.
Right.
Um, Now, is there anything
Right.
that you wanted to know in particular before with as we move into the Duras family? 'Cause there's a lot about the Duras people.
Well, I mean, I guess you'll be recapping all of the major events, so I don't need to say anything. So yeah,
Ah,
no, go ahead.
all right. So as we know, in this episode, we see Taral Duras, which we saw him for the first time as a small kid, again around 9 or 10 years old, in the Next Generation, actually, with Lursa and Bator. And turns out that basically Taral is the son of, what was his name? The other Duras brother that Worf kills.
Off the top of my head, I
Um,
can't say I know.
Gosh, I can't believe they just always called them Duras. But anyway, as we know, Lursa and Bator were of the Duras family. They were raising their nephew basically to take over for their brother who Worf killed. Worf killed this Duras brother because he killed Kalar. Remember when they were trying to uncover who was the
Yes.
traitor
Mm.
that killed all the Klingons at Kittimer,
I was
and they
so mad
tried to
about that.
blame,
I love
yes.
Kalar. She's a great
Oh,
character.
she was a great character, yes. And when Worf took the discommendation to cover up for the Duras family dishonor, and then Kalar uncovered that plot, and then Duras killed her before she could reveal everything. So then
Right.
Worf went total Klingon badass on him, beamed over to the ship, and stabbed him to death. And it was fantastic. I
Yeah.
love that. In fact, you know what? After this is over, I'm probably gonna go back and watch that episode because I'm in a very Worf Klingon mood. But there's another Duras that we have not been able to cover because we never got to really talk about the Duras family before. So at this point, when we're watching this episode, Terrar would have been the last Duras because, as we know, Lursa and Bator died in the Star
La-
Trek Generations movie.
yes. Yep.
So he was the last one. And, with his father being dead, yeah, it was all on him to kind of restore the family. But
Right.
there is another Duras that if you didn't watch a certain other Star Trek show, you would never know about. And that show was, of course, Star Trek Enterprise. And that Duras, who would have been, I guess, grandfather or maybe great grandfather, but considering how long Klingons live, he could have just been grandfather Duras.
Okay.
OG, the original Duras. He caused no end of trouble for Captain Archer until Archer finally killed him in the season 4 opener. Archer blew up his ship. So
Wow.
um, the
No
Duras
spoilers.
family. Yeah, sorry, I just don't like the Duras family at all. Like that's the thing. Like Star Trek has done a great job of making me hate this particular line of Klingons. Maybe because I like Worf so much, and I keep seeing other Klingons like mistreat him or try to
Mm,
manipulate him, and it
right.
always just makes me feel bad. Like again, there's
Yeah.
something about Worf that I like, and I don't know if I can say necessarily I identify with or whatever, but um, he's again that like you said, he's an outsider kind of looking in. He's got this kind of distilled version of what it means to be Klingon. He's trying to aspire to be better than he is and better than those that are, especially the negative ones around him, but he never really seems to get his due until it's like way too late, and it just always makes me upset. And so to see like Core come in and seemingly like embrace Worf. They talk, they stay up late, they drink Uridian brandy together, they have this great bonding moment, and then to
Right.
see him like trash Worf later on, I was
Yeah.
just like, you know what?
And Worf do the same. Worf
Yeah,
do the same. Yeah. That's what I mean. I agree with you there. I'm like, I'm sad this relationship, this budding relationship broke down. Like I can understand it had tension. Give it tension. Give it a moment where they say a few words to each other. But by the end, I want instead of them just agreeing to like both do a thing and part ways, nah, I want them to like, reconcile and yeah.
yeah,
It felt like they
yeah.
missed opportunity.
Well, um, again, be quiet. We got more to come. We got more to come on this.
Okay, great,
Um,
great.
But I did want to also talk about Worf's history here a bit. Like, he talks about growing up, and he's, as we know, he was an orphan. This was not by choice that he ended up with humans
Um,
raising him.
mhm,
His parents were killed. He made it to obviously a great foster family to take in a Klingon child and raise him. And they tried their best to give him kind of the best of both worlds, best of humanity, and also. Um, Letting him embrace his Klingon heritage. And I mean, he even says in this episode there was a time when he finally got to go back to the Klingon homeworld, and he was with
right,
his cousins and stuff again, and he thought that he was going to be embraced as a member of the family, and instead they treated him like crap. They treated him like an outsider. He was
right,
too human for them. He was too different. I couldn't imagine a bigger disappointment for a child, because it's not like Worf was a baby and taken to human parents.
right,
Okay. He was old enough that he had memories of his mother and father, and
right,
had memories of like where he lived and where he grew up and stuff like that. He knew these things.
right,
And then all that was suddenly violently taken away from him. And then years later, when he gets a chance to kind of go back and potentially reconnect with some of these people, they, instead of looking at him as, okay, again, he's been through a trauma, through a loss, they ridicule him.
right,
They tease him and they ostracize him.
right.
And he almost dies because of it.
Yeah.
Like that's
Three
that's the other
days
crazy
without
part
food
of
and
it. Yeah,
water.
3 days without food and water. Yeah. He almost dies because of this.
Mhm.
So yeah, really feel for the guy, and growing up and feeling like, he had this destiny to be a part of something else and to do something different. And maybe that's why he does treat the Klingon code with such um, austerity, because
Right,
for him, he was destined to do something great. And so he
right,
needed to adhere to a very strict, you know, worldview in order to
right,
make sure he could fulfill the destiny he had envisioned for himself.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's a great. As you said earlier. You feel like Worf, and then he reveals that he thinks he had a vision of Kahless, telling him that you're going to do something no other Klingon has ever done before, and he initially thought he thought for most of his life that that was him joining the Federation and being loyal to the Federation and
Hmm.
being the only Klingon in the Federation. But now he thinks that that means he's going to have the sword and do something with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's the egomania surrounding the sword. I mean, the fact that it seemed to come on so suddenly made me feel like, okay, is it the sword exerting some sort of power? Like, is Dax gonna start falling prey to it at some point, or
Okay.
is she gonna like realize what's happening?
So bear with me on this, because here's what I think. All right. Going back to what you just pointed out, he had the vision of Kahless, who said he was going to do something that no Klingon has ever done.
Right.
Right. So now just keep in mind, he was young, he was starving, he was dehydrated,
He was
and he
definitely
had this,
hallucinating.
right.
Yeah.
And he had this vision. Right. And the vision saves his life. Because of this vision, he becomes kind of like obsessed in a way with Klingon culture and with Kahless and with doing what he's got to do to kind of fulfill this destiny, right? So now let's leap forward several years. He's gone through Starfleet Academy. He's had all kinds of other experiences, and he's been on both sides of Klingon popularity more times than anybody can count. You know, I mean, seriously, he has. And so
Yeah.
now we come to this moment where once again he feels like he's on the outs, right? And he is on the outs. Gowron has basically disowned him and stripped him of everything.
Right.
Once again, he is now he has nothing but this belief to hold
Right.
on to. Okay, here comes Dahar Master Core and lays out this journey, this quest, and for a person like that who believes so fully, so completely, to hear about something like that, you had to know that he was going to do everything he could to get involved with it, even if it wasn't going to be successful. Just to be on a Klingon quest,
Right.
that would have been everything to him.
Right.
And then in that moment when they actually find the sword of Kahless, the man who appeared to him and saved his life in a vision, to hold on to his very sword, it's impossible for like the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, I don't understand how he could not have thought it was meant for him. He
Right.
survived all this stuff, all these trials, the death of his mate, the dissolution of his family, his titles, his lands, over and over again, given, taken, seized, the multiple death attempts or death threats, and all this stuff that he has made it through to come to this moment to hold on to the symbol of Klingon power and sovereignty and just this ability that it could come with to be one of his people again.
Right.
I was like, I understood completely when he was like, Kor's an old man. His
Yeah.
time is over. It's
Right.
my time now. I was like,
Right.
yes, it is, Worf.
Yeah.
Get you some, man.
Yeah.
Go for it. I was on board. Yes, he
Right.
sounded. Yes, I will admit it. He sounded crazy. He had Gowron's crazy eyes there for a minute with a couple, but I was on board. I wanted
Yeah.
Worf to take it and say, "Screw the Emperor. I'm Chancellor now," and lead. I
Right.
want Worf to be the Chancellor.
Right. Yeah. 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 You definitely feel for Worf there. I agree. Uh, but the only problem I had the whole time was like, how are they really going to prove that this is the sword, though? I mean, it looks legit. Like as soon as they show it, that thing looks like a badass batleth. That
Well,
is
remember,
the batleth this batleth you've ever batleth.
yeah, it is.
Yeah,
That is the yeah. That one that
it's even got that middle spike. Like
and
the
it's got
others
the and it's
don't.
got the weird like kind of curvy, the waves to it and everything else. I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
this one has seen some things.
and it's got texture to it. It's got the Klingon
Hmm.
symbol, which must have always been the reason they had the symbols because it was originally Kahless' symbol or something. I never realized that until it was on the ballot. But yeah, it looks so good. But I was
But I'm
always
gonna, but
wondering.
Dax verifies that it is the
No, I'm
sword.
not
Remember,
saying.
she
I'm not
scans it.
saying from Dax's point of view. I'm talking about like when you go to Galron, you're like you got to submit because I got the sword. How does he not go like prove it? I don't believe that's the sword.
Well, of course
Um,
they of course they would, and that was kind of what they were alluding to as what would happen if this made it back to Klingon society. There would be infighting, civil wars erupting. Some people who believe, some people who don't believe, so forth and so on. And as we saw when they were confronting other Klingons throughout, trying to get away from Taral and his group, you know, it wasn't just let's run away from them. It often was let's turn and fight. We have the sword. Let's turn and fight. And I mean, yes, they won every fight, but did they win because of the sword or did they win because they were great fighters? You have a Dahar master, and then of course you have Worf, who is the baddest Klingon we've ever seen, and he's beating them left and right with one hand and a mek'leth. I mean, yes,
yeah,
if he can take you with one hand and the mek'leth, he can take you with Kahless's sword.
yeah.
That's
He's
there's
already
uh,
hemorrhaging on the inside. Yeah,
right, and he's still killing y'all. So
yeah,
what? You guys had one shot, and all you did was make him bleed a little. So yeah,
yeah.
but obviously I love this episode. There's also a lot of great callbacks here, little things like the Lethian who
Hmm.
does steal
Yeah, as soon as he
Core's
appeared
memories.
on screen, I had to pause it. It's like, is that who I think it is? And I went and looked
Yeah.
it up real quick. I was like, I'm not crazy here. Yeah,
hmm And then another i- interesting callback is when they go into Cisco's office to try to convince him to give them the shuttlecraft. Do you remember what Cisco was doing in the
he was
office?
shaving with
He
this
was
weird
shaving. That's right. He was shaving with this little blue,
block.
obviously Trekified shaver, right? But
Yeah,
it's a great callback because it's the same thing that they used in the Next Generation episode where Jordy was shaving. And it's the
really.
same
Okay.
one.
Well,
Right.
speaking of that,
I
I'm sure
was
you're.
gonna say, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead,
yeah.
David.
Also, oh,
Hmm.
okay.
Why is it important that we
Levar
bring up Jordy LaForge?
LeVar Burton is the director of this episode.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
And I
and
have
that.
to imagine that they had a great time behind the scenes,
Yeah,
him and Michael Dorn obviously having worked together for years, and then they get to go to this new set and hang out and work with other people and stuff before. And then
yeah,
you've got other, again, the return of Core, played by John Colicos, who has played Core forever, as we remarked when they brought them back with
yeah.
Core, Kang, and Koloth. Those are like the original Klingons
Right.
from the original series.
Yeah.
When Kirk was running around, he ran into all of them at some point or another, and so here he is back once again to
Right.
kind of stir things up a bit. So love that he uh, came back. And he also, John loved this episode. He talks about how much he just really enjoyed that they were finally kind of opening things up with the Klingons and, giving them more to do. And he got to, kind of, instead of just being like really stiff and, stodgy and all that kind of stuff, that he was making, braggadocious statements, and he's baiting Worf, and they got their little barbs going back and forth and stuff. He
Right.
liked being that different kind of engaging combative person, instead of always being like a warrior must do this and a warrior must do, like all that kind of stuff. So
Right.
that was more Kang. If you remember when the three
Yes.
Klingons were together, that was more Kang.
Yes.
Kang was
Yeah.
very much the hardcore militaristic one.
Right.
Core is more your um
Braggadocious.
playful, right,
Yeah.
playful
Definitely drinks too much,
bragging.
even in
Yes,
those previous episodes. Yeah.
he drinks too much, he eats too much, he's more fun. And
Right.
then of course you had Koloth, who he
Is
was
the
kind of
leader.
neutral that way, but he
Yeah.
was just more.
Very much the Three
Yeah.
Musketeers. I mean,
Yes.
I don't know if we mentioned
Yes.
that the first time, but yeah, they actually fit the Three Musketeer archetypes to a T with Dax as D'Artagnan,
Yes.
the third or fourth Musketeer of the three. I man, I can't believe I didn't catch that. I don't know if I mentioned that when we first watched that
No,
episode,
we
but that
didn't.
is
We
it's
didn't, but
to a
that's a good thing.
T. That thing's
Yeah.
it's so obvious now that it like slaps me in the face.
and
Like that's
then, and
exactly what they
yeah,
were
and even
doing.
that, and yeah, even that episode, yeah, like if you think about the episode where they go to hunt the albino, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
That's a great setup for how they were kind of doing everything. And then, they all had their kind of, when the chips were down, they all had their set, we're warriors marching off to our doom kind of thing. But
yes,
it's the youthful Dax who's kind of like, well, let's be sly about it and lay
right.
traps and do tricks and
Yeah,
do things like that, and kind
yes.
of broke that mantra up a bit for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, I'm mad at myself that I mean I hope I remembered I noticed that during when we first watched it, but at the moment I'm thinking I didn't realize until
No,
just now.
no,
And I'm
you
like,
didn't
no,
you
it's
didn't
to a
bring that up.
T.
Yeah.
It's the Three Musketeers to a T. Wow. Okay. But anyway,
Yeah.
um,
No, that's
yeah,
fine. That's what
yeah.
happens. That's one of the great things about this show. A lot of different things that we get to, um,
Like, I
appreciate
guess
at
the
different
question
times.
now is like, did they intentionally do that? They were intentionally trying to invoke the Three Musketeers with
I don't
those
know.
three characters, or if it's just
That'd
a
be a good question for
archetype
a deep
that
dive.
just yeah, is it
Hmm.
just an archetype that just works so well that it managed to find its way into Star Trek, or is it a callback to? I mean, it feels like a callback, but it also feels original. Like they did a good job of making it feel
Yeah,
legit.
I would
Yeah,
say that it's probably one of more of those situation of like what you just did, where if you've watched it, now you're kind of rethinking of it, you can kind of see it now. I
right.
don't think it was intentionally set up to be that way, but I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm going to look it up. I will I will check.
Okay.
But no, I don't think that it was necessarily intentional. It just kind of fit that very
Right.
well.
Yeah. Again, the
Um,
archetype is probably just that good.
yeah.
Archetypes pop back up of their own accord
Mhm.
without having to be forced. So yeah.
And so, of course, as we were saying earlier, this is a great episode for the Klingons. We get a lot of past backstory stuff. We get a lot of Worf development, which is, very important because, while Way of the Warrior, the first episode of season four, kind of brought, not kind of, but did bring Worf into Deep Space Nine. As we've seen in the episodes that have since followed, it's been kind of difficult, kind of getting Worf into the fold and really making him a part of the Deep Space Nine crew. He
Right.
stands apart, even in this, which is interesting because that's kind of what the whole episode's been about. The fact that Worf is kind of off on his own a lot. He's kind of isolated. And so
Right.
here we have this attempt to really get away from that and bring him in.
Right.
And it's interesting that I feel like it works considering the only cast member from Deep Space Nine that's truly involved is Dax. Um, Cisco's, barely there.
Yeah.
There's, no one else. Some of the main characters from Deep Space Nine really play a significant role in the developing story that we have here. And we have no B story. This is an
Yeah.
all A. So
Yeah.
there was nothing else going on basically.
Yeah.
So
Quark has one line about I don't like Klingons because their stories are all terrible and there's no
everybody
profit. It's
died.
all death.
What makes
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think Bashir, O'Brien, Kira showed up at all, did they?
They were there in the very beginning when Core is telling his
Oh, that's
story.
right. They
They're
all
all
talk to
sitting
each
there.
other.
They're all there. Odo is there, Kira, Bashir, O'Brien, and Odo and Kira are kind of like, yeah, his story is a bunch of
Well, I think
BS.
O'Brien says to Odo, like, "Do you think any of this is
Well,
true?"
no, Kira and Odo say that too. Kira, Odo, and Bashir, they're like, oh, this is, I don't think any of this is true. He's
Yeah.
exaggerating, whatever. And then O'Brien breaks all that up. He's like, who cares?
Oh, that's
He tells it
right.
well. He
That's
tells it well. That's
exactly
what's
what that
important.
scene was. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he
So,
tells it well. Yeah. It makes you wonder about O'Brien. Like, does O'Brien
hey,
like a good yarn? I don't remember
yeah,
hearing. He doesn't give a lot of yarns himself, but
yeah, no, I mean, that's the folksy everyman charm of O'Brien.
yeah,
He loves a good story, man. And
right.
so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I think that we've pretty much crossed off all the things we needed to for this particular episode.
right.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, by the way you've spoken, it sounds like the sword of Kahless has not yet made its return yet. So I guess I don't have to
No,
worry about that at all. Um,
it does not.
yeah,
It does not pop up again in Deep Space Nine.
gotcha.
That's what I will say.
Oh, okay then.
It's
Well, let me.
awesome.
So the other thing. So not this year, but last year, I gave you a bat lift multi tool. You still have
Yes,
it?
you did, and
Yeah.
it is.
I'm just curious, how is it holding up?
I actually used it today
Very
because of
good.
all the things that were breaking down,
Ah,
and I have other tools, but
that's so easy to
I
grab
needed
that.
to
It's on
get
your
it.
keychain.
And it was I took it off the keychain, but
Oh,
it was the perfect size because it was flat, so I could wedge it right into this space and turn it. And because it was flat, but then it's got that curve on it, it fit perfectly to like round over the bar so I could still make the turn. And I was like, you know what? This is a great save because I couldn't have gotten that in there any other way. I just couldn't have done it. And I was like,
that's
I
awesome.
was like, I said, I don't know. I said, this is whoever designed this. Again, I remember my thought was, whomever designed this, I'm sure they thought this would just be like a little cool gimmicky toy, but it's come in handy. That weird shape to it was just enough to reach, and then the curve, because it's the bat left, the curve
Right.
was just enough to get over
Yeah.
the bar each time. And I was like, that's yeah, this is great.
Kalis came to me in a vision and told me I needed to
Yeah,
buy that
there
for
you
your
go. All
birthday.
right, all right. I think it's gotten late. David's.
I'm not Worf and Core aren't the only ones getting a little egotistical.
Oh man. I tell you, the episodes like this though, they do make me want to like go out and buy like a bunch of Klingon stuff because I mean, like they just have like the best stuff.
Yeah,
I love the Batleth, I love the Mechleth,
yeah.
and then they've got the little blade, the Talk, I believe it's called, is the dagger that Core pulls on Worf later on in the episode. And then in Star Trek Picard, older Worf has a new design on a Klingon sword called
Mhm.
the Kurleth, and that thing looks awesome.
Yeah.
And if I can ever, one, figure out who makes them, and two, hope like hell it's not too expensive, which I'm sure it will be, but still, I will get one. I will
Right.
proudly get one because it looks amazing. So, for all of you Klingon aficionados out there, if you know someone who does, what do you call it, sword making, I guess, and they do it, I would love to discuss an option, discuss a commission piece with them, I guess, see what we can work
Well,
out.
I have to say I was just quickly Amazon or just quickly googling and found on Amazon I just researched batliths because I did this when I got that keychain tool for you,
Hmm.
but I don't remember finding this. There is a Sword of Kahless batlith replica for $80 on Amazon. I don't know how
Really,
legit this is. Yeah, I don't know if it's
I
pretty
would have to
good.
take
Maybe
a
it's
look at
got
it and see because, yeah, I
It's
wouldn't
got
know.
85 ratings to a 4.3 on Amazon. So 4.3 from 85 people. So it
And it's
sounds
called the
decent.
Sword of Kahless, huh?
Yeah, that's what it says. If you look it up, just Google it real quick. Yeah,
I
sort of
am.
Kalis
I'm Sword of
Batleth. And
Kahless Batleth. I'm just gonna go straight to Google because um, it's the very first one that pops up. $80. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
it doesn't have the weathering look that
yeah,
the episode version did, but it has the symbol. It's got that central spike that other Batleths haven't had.
yeah.
Um,
So no, this is not
Not
good.
good enough.
No, and I
I
say this because I own this already, and when I
it's too
purchased
small.
it,
That's when it's too
yeah,
small,
when
right?
I purchased it, oh wait, this is only 8.5 inches, so this is different. Hang on just a second, folks.
Didn't expect to be doing a review of online 8.5 inches. Um, so yeah, that's not real. Still fun though, I'm sure. Oh yeah, someone's holding it in their hand. Yeah, it looks too small in this
Yeah.
picture here. But
So I should have been prepared for this, and I apologize for my brief absence for those of you who are watching us live as I stepped away. However, as I said, I purchased this. As you can see, it's larger than the 8 inches that that thing on there
yeah.
was. But while it's supposed to be the same, like the sort of Kahless thing here, my major complaints about it is one, um, it's painted to look sharp. Okay, so those
Oh,
these points are not like 100% like real bladed edges here. That's like
right.
paint. That's like paint that's done here.
Okay.
So
It's only pointy in that it comes to a point,
right,
but not a sharp
right. It's
point.
not a
Yeah,
sharp
yeah,
point,
yeah.
not naturally. Yeah, don't let the coloring here fool you. That
Lighting.
is like
Gotcha.
that's not going to cut anything ever.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
But I mean, it's nice to look at, and from afar, like I had it hanging up on my wall, and I mean, I liked it enough to do that. But when I had originally bought this thing, I was definitely going for way more realistic, authentic, so forth. And that's when I learned, lesson learned. For anything legit for something like this, you can't buy it off Amazon. You're gonna have to go somewhere else. So I
Yeah.
have talked with some people who have purchased things like this before, and they've told me to check out Etsy because apparently there's a lot of like metal workers and stuff who do custom jobs on Etsy. But
Right.
I really haven't gotten around to doing it. So who knows? Maybe
Gotcha.
Etsy is the place to go, and I can get a much better screen accurate weapon,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And now that we, here in Texas, you can carry swords. So what I need now is Worf's metal baldric, and I need to be able to attach my Klingon sword to the back, and then I'll be set to walk down the street
Yeah.
safely. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be
Not that
awesome.
many people are going to mess with me anyway, but I'm just saying. I mean, all the more intimidating if you see me
Yeah.
walking through the streets in Klingon makeup and a giant sword on my back. So.
Ah, man, you make so many people's day. You need to go to a convention already.
You know what? Like maybe that's what I'll do. Like, I'm already doing the workout path, right? So at the end of the year, after a full year of doing all this stuff, just get all decked out, full cosplay, 100%, and just roll through a Comic Con and be like, he's the best Klingon. That's him right there. Just give him the award. I don't know,
Right.
and just like not talk the whole time. Just
Right.
stand in places. Be like, what's? Yeah, I think I would win. I think I would win. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I do believe that we have recapped everything we needed to about this episode and a dash extra. So,
Mhm.
with that, I would just say again, you should find us and follow us anywhere that you do your social medias, and you can listen to us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. Other than that, until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.